work any more than fully human. Okay, computers don't know what you want. I mean, the computer algorithms were invented by a guy that looks a little like me in a basement 5 years ago. They don't know what you're thinking now, right? You don't even know what you want to think, right? You don't know what the innovation is that you're going to come up with. How could it possibly work? Okay. So our alternative was, or is, computer-assisted categorization. And we have a method, we call it consilience. And so it's not fully automated, it's not fully human, it's computer assisted. So you decide what's important, but with some help. And we invert the effort. So you innovate as much as possible. We tell the human being to innovate, and then the computer puts the things in the categories. Okay? So literally what we do is we take the space of all possible categorization schemes, which is, so ideally, we would take all possible categorization schemes. We would show you this clustering, then this one, then this one, then this one. There'd be an enormous number. You'd evaluate every one and pick the one you like. You can't possibly do that. It would take the rest of time, but literally the rest of time, or at least more time than has existed until now. And so what do we do? Well, we've come up with a way to take that, put it in an organized fashion so that you can actually understand it and traverse the space of possible clusterings and choose one that's of interest. Okay. So I'm not going to show you the math of it, but because it's all behind the scenes. But we even have a computer program that and a website that is almost ready to be released. But let me show you an example that combines the last several questions. Okay. So we wanted to know what members of Congress do because what the heck do they do, right? Okay. You know what they actually do. They basically try to get reelected. Okay. So how do we figure that out? So we took 64,000 press releases from the U.S. Senate. That's how members of the Senate express what they're interested in. And if you go by the categorization that Dave Mayhew came up with about 40 years ago, which is, this is what members of Congress do. They try to get reelected in 3 ways. By advertising, look at me, I'm a member of Congress. By position taking, look at me, I'm a conservative Republican or a liberal Democrat. Or number 3, credit claiming, look at me, I brought this bridge to my district. So we wanted to find a new insightful categorization scheme that was useful to us. Useful to us means we can publish it. Okay? So that's what we care about. Okay? So what categorization would be useful? Okay? So we looked, we found policy areas. Well, that's obvious, but different, right? Economic policy, foreign policy, et cetera. Okay. We looked, we found a bunch of things. And then we found one that we thought, this is interesting. No one had thought of this category before. That's worthwhile. The category is partisan taunting. Okay. It's when one person from one party kicks sand in the other person's eyes rather than trying to balance the federal budget. Joe Wilson, during Obama's State of the Union address, literally stood up and said, "You lie." This is my favorite title of a press release. Senator Lautenberg blasts Republicans as chicken hawks. And made a big picture of a general and a chicken, or chicken in the general's outfit. And of course, in this same category goes basically anything said in the last 12 months by presidents and candidates. So we asked, how common is this? And we used a different method in order to estimate the percent of the 64,000 press releases that are basically just partisan taunts rather than giving policy positions or credit claiming or advertising, etc. And we discovered 27% of all press releases are this, which is, you say, is that a lot? Okay, think of all the emails you've sent. Is it true that 1 out of 4 of your emails is a flame war? Right? But that's what these guys are doing. All right, I'll give you another example. Right, here's a problem. How many students buy the book when we instructors assign you guys to buy the book? Actually, it's less than 50%. Now, if you're stealing it from somewhere else, that's probably okay. However, how many students actually do the reading assignments? Yeah, I know. There's been studies. You know what the number is? 20 to 30% actually. Yeah. So, as a student, you're triaging your time. You're trying to, do what you can do. As an instructor, Like, I'm spending all my time, preparing lectures, and you're not even prepared for class. That's going to be lousy for me as the instructor, and it's going to be lousy actually for all your fellow students because the classroom discussion is going to be much degraded. So that's really a bad thing. So we got to figure out how to change your minds. How do we do that? Okay. So we could ask the instructor to write a quiz. Quizzes are horrible. They take a lot of time for the instructor. They require a teacher to come up with distractor questions, which are basically designed to mislead students. I'm trying to be a teacher. I don't want to be misleading you, right? And then you waste precious class time, right, to do this. What a waste of time. And then for students, like, is there anything you like? Well, I'm sure there's things you like less, but I doubt you really like quizzes, where basically you're being quizzed on whether you were paying attention at the bottom of page 64 on the right-hand side. It's a silly game. Okay? So we came up with an alternative. We call it Perusall. I like an extra L. Okay? It's a different kind of collaborative e-reader with all kinds of novel data analytics sewn into it. So, and behavioral research and all kinds of things. With this, we can get 90% of the students to do the reading. And it involves no Velcro. And the idea basically is to turn solitary reading assignments, which is what reading is, into a more engaging collective activity. There's an intrinsic motivation. And so you come to the website, and you'll see what looks like a PDF. It's not really a PDF because we'll protect the publisher's intellectual property. You'll read the book, and then we'll give you another assignment which is annotated. So if you have a question, you just highlight it and say, I don't understand this. Totally fine, good thing. Okay? And other people can respond to you in threads, sort of Facebook style. And if you understand something and you want to help out a fellow student, that would be great. Or if you think this point is clear, but it seems to contradict the point earlier on, add those annotations. That's motivating because you can see each other doing it. We do things for social reasons. You can see the little faces of your friends down the left-hand side. It's like class, but it's outside of class. Nobody can see this except the people in your class, except outside of class. There's also an extrinsic motivation, which is we can grade the annotations based upon their quality and engagement automatically better than your instructor could. Okay? So we came up with analytics to code them not only because your instructor would die of boredom from grading all the annotations, but even without that, we can grade it automatically better than that. Okay? And then we have these cool analytics that are designed to help you. So the grades are not adversarial, right? We're not going to get you. Okay? The instructor's going to take like 15% of the grade and assign it to reading, and then Perusal's going to make sure that you get 100% of that 15%. So if you do annotations and they're not good enough, you'll get a little nudge. Okay? If you do some of them and you don't do enough of them, we'll send you a little non-humiliating note. Okay? Non-humiliating, a little thing on the side. Okay? And then the instructor walks. Oh, the other thing, when you say any questions, you know what happens? You saw what happens here, right? When you walk into class, there's nothing the instructor wants more than questions, and there's nothing the instructor gets less of than questions, right? Because you walk in, you trump across class, you put all your stuff down, you're preparing to be entertained, right? You don't have the questions. You have questions, but you don't remember them, right? Right? Okay? Because it's time for you to entertain you, right? So instead, I don't do that anymore. I push the student confusion button on Perusal, and I print out one page and I bring it into class, and I now have the 3 or 4 things that students had the most questions about or were most engaged in, and I start talking about them. And it also highlights the most important annotations, so I don't have to spend my time looking over the students' shoulders and seeing what they're annotating. I have the best annotations with me. And I can say, so the first thing that you didn't understand was, or you were most engaged with, or you were talking about the most, is this. Let me explain it a little better. By the way, Allison, you had a really good point on this. Let me show you Allison's annotation. So it'll save everybody time, and it's not adversarial grading. You can actually, the weird thing is, unlike most of teaching, you can actually focus on learning stuff, right? Which is actually the reason you came there to begin with. Okay? You can actually try it. It's at perusal.com, which we got. So almost impossible to get a website. All right. I'll give one more example. Because I referred to it earlier. All right. So, how do you study censorship in China? Until our first paper on this, Molly Jen and Molly Robert and Jen Pan, two of my graduate students who are now at UCSD and Stanford, respectively. Before we wrote our paper, people would study censorship by talking to somebody that had their post censored. And humans only need a little bit of shred of evidence in order to make a gigantic theory, right? We don't need almost any, we don't even need evidence to make a theory. So what we did is we figured out how to download all Chinese language social media posts before the Chinese government could censor them. So we had the entire corpus of Chinese language censored social media posts that the Chinese government, that the Chinese people couldn't read because they weren't allowed to, but we figured out how to get them, so we had them. And so we had a pile of censored posts and a pile of uncensored posts. We tried to figure out with new methods of automated text analysis, what was the Chinese government after? We developed these methods. Now, just to explain to you what the story is, everybody knows the goal of Chinese censorship, right? It's to stop criticism and protest about the state, its leaders, and their policies. Okay? The first thing we learned was this was utterly and completely wrong. Okay? So we thought, well, that's cool. Okay? What could be the goal then? Okay? And we looked at it one way, and we didn't see anything. We looked at it another way, and we didn't see anything. We looked at it another way, and we didn't see anything. And as a side point, you know the argument that theory is dead because we have so much data? That's a ridiculous argument. Here's why. We have all the data in the world, okay? But unless you have a lens through which to look at the data, you're not going to see anything. And that's exactly what we saw, which was nothing for a long time. Until we thought that maybe what we should do is divide the question into maybe the goal is to stop criticism of the state, or maybe the goal is to stop collective action, that is protest, or crowd formation. We looked at it that way, and everything clarified. The results were unambiguous. The first is wrong, the second's right. I love to use words, as a political scientist, I love the chance to use words like wrong or right. You don't get that often, okay? But the empirical results are really clear. You can say the nastiest things about the Chinese government. You can say the leaders of this government are all stealing money. They have the money in overseas bank accounts. Here's the bank accounts. And by the way, they all have mistresses, and here are their names. That will not be censored. But if you say, and let's go protest, they will censor you. In fact, if you say, the leaders of this other town are doing such a great job, let's have a rally in their favor. Censored. Okay? They don't care what you think of them. They are, after all, a bunch of dictators. What should you think of them? Okay? They only care what you can do. And the only thing they have to fear is not the West, it's not other military powers. They have nuclear weapons and lots of soldiers. Okay? What do they fear? They fear their own people. They fear their own people rising up and throwing them out of power. That's the thing they worry about. So it's collective action that's the big deal. So that's what they censor. The interesting thing about this is that social media is actionable. It's actionable for them, and it's actionable, therefore, for us. We discovered that it's actionable for them. The Chinese leaders not only don't care about, not only allow criticism, but they measure criticism. They use it to judge their local officials. There's 700,000 governments in China. How do you make sure they're all not stealing? How do you make sure that every single one of them is not stealing too much money, so much that it pisses off the people and gets them to protest, and the protests spread contagiously across the country and get you, the leader of China, thrown out of power? Okay? So you can't run 700,000 public opinion polls when you think you'd be like, the American public, right? But you can do it with social media, and they do. So it's actionable for them. And then they censor anytime there's collective action potential. So the interesting thing is, we discovered this. So we can now make social media actionable. We can use criticism and censorship to predict what the Chinese government is going to do ahead of time. Let me just do one more thing. So we can predict officials who are in trouble and likely to be replaced. We've predicted which dissidents they're going to arrest because they start censoring them 4 or 5 days ahead of time. Which peace treaties they're going to sign. We see evidence of scandals before they happen. Disagreements between local leaders and centralized leaders. The propaganda department is an enormous operation designed to slow the flow of information. But it's so large, it conveys a lot about the intentions of the leaders. it's like an elephant tiptoeing around. It leaves big footprints. And if you study things at scale, you can see patterns you wouldn't otherwise.
I just wanted some clarification. You said that the goal is to stop collective action, but if that's merely the goal, then why censor individual words like freedom?
So, this was our first paper, and then we realized this doesn't capture this is censorship by human. So the humans actually read, they have human censors that work for the government, work for the social media companies, and they read and they take them off. We then realized that this paper had a hole in it, which was that in addition to having humans read, they do some of the filtering automatically, like with keyword filter. So we did another study in which we wrote social media posts and posted them on the web in the randomly assigned to criticism or support of the government or collective action or not collective action. So the filtering of words was you could study with that method because you knew what was going in. With this method, we didn't know, if something was filtered before it got to the web, we wouldn't see it. Okay? So what we learned with that other study, which is a long way of answering your question, is that the automated filtering methods don't really work. Okay? They're just not very good. We have better methods. Please, I don't want that contract. But they don't work. And they're corrected by humans after the fact.
So you're telling us that, when you have all this big data, you're coming up with these amazing ways of analyzing it, new technology, it's great, but it's novel and ridiculous. But where would we start if we wanted to do this? What would we learn to cope with this program?
Yeah. This project involves some, I'll tell you, so where do you start? Let me tell you how I started to do this project. Because I don't speak Chinese. I don't study China. I've never studied censorship. And it's not like one day, my two co-authors and I sat down and said, hey, let's study censorship. We were coming up with a method. We were interested in methods of automated text analysis. And we thought, let's take this method that we had invented and it's being widely used. Let's see whether we can improve it. And that's what we were after. And we thought, let's push the method until it breaks, and then we'll learn something. Okay? Because then we could fix what breaks. How are we going to do that? We thought, well, let's try it in Chinese. We developed it for English. This is literally what happens. Right? So we called Crimson Hexagon, the company I mentioned earlier, because they go around the world and collect all publicly available social media posts. And they sent us a database of Chinese language posts and the URLs. And we did our method, or we did our pushing until it breaks, and we learned some things. And then I said to Jen and Molly, hey, go back to